The Mike Ashley era is over at Newcastle United. Following 14 years, 13 managers, 2 relegations, 2 championship titles, and one very unpopular and short-lived stadium name change, Newcastle United are no longer owned by a man who is synonymous with 0-hour contracts and oversized mugs. I have already spoken pretty extensively about Newcastle United's new owners on this channel, but in today's video, following a suggestion from the Bourne Vale Reserves Football Club's Twitter account, I thought I'd take a little look back at Ashley's 14-year stint at St James's Park. Newcastle famously operated under fairly tight financial restraints under the sportswear tycoon, frequently recruiting free agents and players discarded by the big clubs whilst maintaining a certain penchant for French players, particularly during Graham Carr's time working with the club. The only time Newcastle really seemed to break the bank on either transfer fees or wages in relation to their peers was following Premier League relegation, with Ashley well aware that speedily returning to the Premier League was crucial in terms of Newcastle's revenue and the value of the club when it came to disposing of the business. It must be said that, whilst working within that framework, Newcastle did actually make some very good signings. The likes of Demba Ba, Muzo Sissoko, Jorginho Wijnaldum, Johan Cabaye, and most recently Alan Saint-Maximin all proved to be excellent pieces of business for the club. But when you take such a scattergun bargain basement approach to the transfer market, you're always going to get mixed results. In today's video, we're focusing on the very worst signings that Newcastle made during the Mike Ashley era, and it would be fair to say that I wasn't lacking in candidates. Without further ado then, of all of the really bad Newcastle United signings over the last 14 years, here are the very worst ones. Emmanuel Riviere. I mentioned Newcastle's penchant for signing players from France during the introduction, and don't be at all surprised if Emmanuel Riviere isn't the only player from La République to feature in this 7. It is worth pointing out that, whilst Emmanuel Riviere arrived in Newcastle from France, lived in France from the age of 15 onwards, and represented France at under 16, 17, 18, 19, and under 21 level, he was not born in France, and since 2019, he has represented a national team other than France. Riviere was born in Martinique, a French overseas department and island in the Eastern Caribbean Sea, and if you're interested in learning more about Martinique and some of the incredible footballers with roots to the island, and why wouldn't you be, I have made a video taking a look at what the Martinique national football team could look like, theoretically, if all eligible players had declared for them, which might be of interest to you. Riviere arrived at Newcastle from Monaco in the summer of 2014, having just hit double figures in the top flight of French football for the first time, and he arrived for a fee of £6 million. Upon his arrival, Newcastle boss Alan Pardew stated, quote, "This is an important signing because the striking area is one we had to improve. We know that he will score goals." End quote. Pardew was right in a sense that Riviere would score goals, plural, but only just. The front man struck thrice in 33 appearances at St James's Park before being sold for less than £1 million. Riviere now plays for Crotone in Serie A, where he has a similarly terrible record of 1 goal in 21 games, and he gets us started in this 7. Siem de Jong. Siem de Jong's younger brother Luke is currently doing a fine job of looking woefully out of his depth, even in the worst Barcelona team, for a generation. In fairness, so would I. In 2014, both brothers found themselves making moves to St James's Park, though, oddly, they wouldn't actually spend any time together at the club. Luke arrived on loan from Borussia Mönchengladbach in January 2014, but he failed to score in 12 outings for Newcastle before making a permanent move to PSV the following summer. Clearly not put off by his brother's struggles in the northeast, that summer, Newcastle went out and signed Siem de Jong from Ajax for £6 million. Alan Pardew immediately installed de Jong as Newcastle's vice-captain, serving as Fabrizio Colaccini's deputy, but de Jong would never actually captain the club. That's largely because, in only his second game for the club, de Jong suffered a muscle strain to his right thigh, which ruled him out of action for 4 months. Just when he was due to return to full first-team training, de Jong suffered from a collapsed lung, an injury that he had also had at Ajax, which pretty much ruled him out for the rest of the season. De Jong returned the following season, but he only started 6 games for the club and only 4 in the Premier League. Across his 630 minutes of football and 21 appearances in all competitions, the Dutch number 10 could only manage 1 goal and 1 assist. Jong was sold back to Ajax at a significant loss to Newcastle, and his time spent on the sidelines after a teammate pushed his contact lens into his eye, requiring surgery, probably best sums up his time at the club. Florian Thauvin. I told you to expect more Francophile signings, and unlike Emmanuel Riviere, Florian Thauvin was not only born in France, in Orleans to be specific, he is also a full French international who was part of Didier Deschamps' World Cup winning team in 2018. Thauvin's career has been a slightly unusual one. The Frenchman followed in Hatem Ben Arfa's footsteps by joining Newcastle from Marseille in the summer of 2015 for a reported fee of £15 million. Manager Steve McLaren described Thauvin as, quote, one of the best young players in Europe, stating that, we believe that he will have a very bright future at Newcastle. You could argue that the former England boss was right about Thauvin's talent, but not so much about his career at Newcastle. At 22, Thauvin struggled to adapt to a new league, language, and culture, admitting that he found the physicality of the Premier League to be his biggest stumbling block. He made just 16 appearances at St James's Park, scoring once, in his only real standout performance, which came against Northampton Town in the League Cup. After just 6 months, Thauvin returned to Marseille, initially on loan, but then on a permanent the following summer, for less than £10 million. Newcastle fans were then left wondering what might have been, as Thauvin tore up Ligue 1, scoring 15 goals and making 11 assists from the right flank in his first season back at the club. Oddly, there did always seem to be something special about Thauvin in Marseille, and I don't just mean playing for Marseille. His record at the Stade Velodrome always far outstripped his record when playing away from home. Aged 28 now, in spite of his fine form at Marseille, Thauvin took the decision to join Tigres in Mexico in May, linking up with another former Marseille star in the form of André Pierre Gignac. Yoshinori Muto. I must admit that, whilst I thought some of the signings in this seven seemed pretty dubious from the word go, Yoshinori Muto wasn't one of them. He impressed me on the handful of occasions that I had seen him play at Mainz, and for £9.5 million, I thought he seemed like a pretty reasonable gamble on Newcastle's part. Quick, versatile, and industrious, Muto was the only forward that Newcastle brought in over the summer of 2018, having only scored 39 goals in the Premier League the previous season. Muto would be unable to address that particular problem, scoring just 1 goal in 18 games during his debut campaign under Rafa Benitez, and 1 goal in 10 games the following season, which came in the EFL Cup, under Steve Bruce. In the summer of 2020, Muto left Newcastle to join Eibar on loan, where he again managed just a solitary goal in 26 La Liga appearances. Over the summer, Muto left Newcastle on a permanent basis, as far as I can tell, without any transfer fee having been paid. Muto still had a year left on his contract at St James's Park, but the Magpies were presumably willing to let him go for free in order to avoid having to pay him for another 12 months. Given his reported £54,000 a week wages and £9.5 million transfer fee, plus bonuses, Muto most likely cost Newcastle somewhere in the region of £20 million all told, which works out at roughly £20 million per Premier League goal scored at the club. Zico. A signing from the beginning of the Mike Ashley era, Spanish centre-forward Zico joined the Magpies in 2008 during only Ashley's second summer at the club. I remember well that his debut was against Hull City at a game which featured several protests against the Ashley regime, which the Tigers won 2-1. Had to get that in there. Zico's time at Newcastle wouldn't get much happier than that, if truth be told. Zico was signed along with Nacho Gonzalez, both imported from La Liga, the latter of whom arrived on loan from Valencia, and both would prove to be disastrous deals for both player and club. The signing of both players, against manager Kevin Keegan's wishes, was central to the club legend's decision to resign as manager, and he would be vindicated by both players' Newcastle careers. Zico arrived for a not inconsiderable fee by 2008 standards of £5.6 million, but more costly still were his reported £50,000 a week wages, making him one of the highest earners at the club and among the highest outside of the Premier League's top 6. Zico scored in his debut defeat against Hull City, but that would prove to be his last goal for the club. The Spaniard made just 9 Premier League appearances at St James's Park in total, followed by loans to Racing Santander and Deportivo La Coruña, before joining Cordoba on a free transfer. In total, Zico cost Newcastle more than £15 million at a time when Wesley Sneijder cost less than that amount. Age 35, Zico is still playing now for Alcazon in the Segunda Division. Henri Saivet. The footballer who didn't play any football at Newcastle United, Henri Saivet surely has to go down as one of the Premier League's worst signings of all time. Anyone who played Football Manager during the late 2000s could have been forgiven for getting a little bit excited when Newcastle signed Saivet in 2016, since the Frenchman became one of the best players in world football on a couple of editions of the game following his real-life exploits for France, particularly at under 16 and 17 level. Saivet spent 9 years in the first team at Bordeaux, where he failed to become one of the best players in the world, but he did briefly become one of the better players at Bordeaux. In the 2012-13 and 2013-14 seasons, Saivet's form prompted suggestions of a call-up to the France squad, but they never materialised. By the time that he signed for Newcastle, Saivet was in need of a renaissance, though he still commanded a fee of more than £5 million. Signed on the recommendation of Graham Carr, who I mentioned during the introduction, Saivet was reportedly rewarded with a 5-year deal worth some £32,000 a week. That means that across his 5 years at the club, Saivet cost Newcastle about £14 million in transfer fees and wages combined, minus around £1 million that they received in loan fees. In exchange for that exorbitant outlay, Saivet made 8 appearances across those 5 years at St James's Park and scored 1 goal. The 31-year-old Senegalese international's contract ended last summer, and he remains a free agent at the time of this recording. Joelinton. There are some transfers that look a bit mental when they happen, but turn out to be brilliant pieces of business. I remember the flack that Man City took from a lot of the English press for paying £55 million for Kevin De Bruyne, and just take a look at how that one worked out. Then there are some transfers that look a bit mental at the time and look absolutely deranged with the benefit of hindsight. The signing of Joelinton for either £40 or £43 million is certainly one of those. Having taken over a decade to break their transfer record with Miguel Almiron in January 2019, Newcastle absolutely smashed that record just 6 months later, basically doubling it to bring in Joelinton. You could maybe justify such an expense if you were bringing in a tried and tested household name, but few fans who didn't pay particular attention to the Bundesliga were even aware of the Brazilian. Joelinton had just enjoyed his breakout season in Germany with Hoffenheim, scoring 7 goals in 28 Bundesliga games following a couple of seasons on loan in Austria. Despite all of the jokes now, Joelinton can play a bit, especially for someone of his size, but a £40 million footballer, he is not. What's more, Newcastle seem to have done zero due diligence on their new man, who Steve Bruce played primarily as a centre-forward during his debut campaign, where he had almost never played at Hoffenheim, before then chopping and changing his position almost every other week during his second season. Joelinton has scored 10 goals in 94 games for Newcastle to date, and club legend Rob Lee recently stated that if the club were to sell him now, they would be doing well to get £10 million. That might be a little bit harsh, and I still think that there could be a place for Joelinton at St James's Park if the right manager now comes in and implements a system that accommodates him. But purely based upon the absolutely enormous size of his transfer fee, his substantial pay packet, and his actual talent, he had to take top spot. That is it for my 7, but honourable mentions go to the likes of Leon Best, Gabriel Obertan, Remy Cabella, and John Joe Shelby. Thank you all very much as ever for watching. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this video, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and make sure you are subscribed and have notifications turned on for HITC Sevens. You can also find me on Twitter and on Instagram via the username @HITC Sevens, should you wish to do so.